We spoke about the Kurdish situation because, I'm Flemish and I know what we say, the Flemish patriot, nationalists, and all this world. I know this world very good. And I hear sometimes that the Flemish independentists, right wing, they like that the Kurdish people, they have an own country.
Yes.
If, for example, there will be a kind of Kurdistan, new country, it will change a lot in the Middle East, because it's an item that not so many people understand very well.
Actually, the first thing the people in the West, regardless of their political affiliation, should understand: the Kurds want an area in Syria, they call it Rojava, which extends from Hasaka in the east towards the Mediterranean in Kasab and Ras al-Basit. And this area, they are 30% of the population. So that means you have two choices. You either will create a dictatorship to rule the 70% by force, or you will expel the 70% from your areas. And in my opinion, the creation of the so-called Kurdistan will lead to very big wars, because the Arabs, the Assyrians, the Muslims, Bedouins in this area, they will not accept to leave their houses or live under the patronage of the Kurds. The Kurds, they enjoy weapons, so they have a choice to expel, and they are doing. In many villages, they are expelling the Arabs from these areas, and they are expelling them towards Idlib or towards the deserts, and then the government sometimes accepts them or receives them. The people here support, they think it's a revolutionary movement, that they want to have their own independence, but Kurds didn't have a state in the entire history, and this is a new idea, because in Syria we are, for example, I'm from Armenian origins. If every sect or ethnicity in Syria wants to have its own state, then let's make 22 states from Syria, because we have more than 22 different ethnicities and religious sects. This is not logical. Some people also say that the Kurds fought against ISIS, so they need a reward. I mean, who didn't fight ISIS in Syria? The Sunnis fought, the Shiites fought, the Alawites fought, the Christians fought against ISIS. So you can't give every single ethnicity or sect their own country. We are fighting for the unity of Syria. Since day one of this war, we are fighting for the independence and the sovereignty. So we either live together as Syrians, regardless of your ethnicity and your sect, or we will perish together if we divide Syria, because the Americans want this divide and conquer strategy, and that's why the Russians and the allies are in Syria. Although they are in good terms with the Kurds, but the Russians and the others, they don't want to divide Syria. They know Syria has this geopolitical importance, and they will lose. The Russians will lose their weight in Syria, the Chinese will lose, the Iranians will lose. This is about also interests. If they give a piece of a cake to any ethnicity, the importance of Syria will reduce, and that means why they are fighting in Syria if it doesn't have this importance.
Yeah, because on the moment that the Turkish, let's say the Turkish army shut down the Russian airplane, it was a mistake from the Turkish. This was a really crazy mistake, because they paid a high price. On that moment, I thought that the Russians were a little playing with the Kurds, kind of revenge.
Yes, the Russians are playing clever in this issue until this moment. Look, they don't say we are against the Kurds or against Rojava or against their independence. They say nothing. Sometimes they cooperate with the Kurds in order to attract the Turkish side more into the Russian side, because the Americans have clear position. We want to create Kurdistan in Syria, and this is a red line for Turkey, and that's why this is one of...
So America defend this position?
Yes, of course. The Americans want for Kurds to have...
But Turkey is also a friend of America, member of NATO.
Yeah, they have some mutual interest in Syria, but in this regard, especially in the Kurdish issue, it's a red line for the Turks to have a Kurdish state on their borders. They have 20 million Kurds in Syria. What will happen to these Kurds, do you think, in Turkey, if they are encouraged and started to do their own operations inside Turkey, or they calls for independence? That means quarter of Turkey will gone very soon. So this is one of the issues the Russians, in my opinion, Putin is playing clever in this. He's trying to attract Turkey into Syria by telling Erdogan that you guys, you and President Assad, you have mutual issue here, you have mutual interest. Both are interested for not having Kurdistan in Syria, so you need to cooperate. It's true that President Assad is not happy by the Turkish role, especially in the last 5-6 years, because they were supporting ISIS, Nusra, Hasha, many terrorist organizations. But this is politics. There is no you can't be enemy with any state forever. Things change during time, and I believe Syrians are able, or they need Turkey in this moment. I'm sad to say this, but we need a strong Sunni state to not to back us, but to be neutral, at least in this regard, because Saudi Arabia is a very...
You mean it can be Turkey?
It can be Turkey because it's our neighbor country.
Is it possible with Erdogan?
Erdogan will not go away anytime soon, so we don't have a choice, we don't have a variety to choose. He just appointed himself as a sultan in Turkey by altering the constitution. So the realism forces us to deal with Turkey. Now in Idlib, it's the backyard of Turkey, and I believe Assad agreed for Turkey to make things calmer in Idlib by fighting al-Nusra, because Idlib is part of the de-escalation zone. And Idlib, there is Al-Qaeda. Why it is part of the de-escalation zone? I believe this part is given to Turkey, just like they did in Jarablus. They came, they fought some ISIS fighters, and they installed their proxies there, the Free Syrian Army. I believe this will might happen in Idlib as well. Assad will not be against this, because fighting in Idlib means you are fighting against 50 to 60,000 fighters, and that means you will lose a lot of soldiers. So let them fight each other, these rebels, and let Turkey deal with this issue, and on the long term we see how can we deal later on with Turkey.
Because now I see that Putin proposed a plan of a kind of division of Syria in some zones. First, a no-fly zone for everybody who is not part of the let's say pro-Assad coalition.
Yes.
And I think what are the countries now that Putin proposes who can say you make Syria safe here, we do it there. There will be a Russian zone, I think an Iranian zone, maybe a Turkish zone. I don't know. It was that. Yeah, I forgot it now.
These de-escalation zones came in a very important timing, and it was agreed between Russia, Iran, and Turkey. Some people say it will divide Syria. I disagree with them, because Russians, look, they knew the Americans after Trump. They don't want to overthrow Assad as long as Assad is weak and divided in Syria. If it's divided, they don't have a problem if it's Assad is in power or not. The Russians did this because the fighters, the Syrian fighters, need to arrive to their resort, and they need to close the borders with Iraq, and we don't have enough manpower to do this. So every time the Syrian army is trying to advance from Palmyra towards the resort, towards east, and from east south Damascus to close the borders with Jordan and Iraq, the proxies of Saudi Arabia and Turkey, they attack from Idlib to North Hama. And then the Syrian army has to send reinforcements from these areas to that area in order to defend Hama. Now, Idlib is in the de-escalation zones. That means Turkey will force its proxies in Idlib not to fight the Syrian army in North Hama or in Homs. And that means the Syrian army will be able to send reinforcements to Palmyra and to southeast of Syria to close the border. And this is what's happening now. They're moving to Tanaf border crossing, and the Americans, they don't want this to happen, and they are moving forward toward their resort. So this is very clever move by the Russians.
Because the opposition ran away from the discussions. The opposition was also invited. Very clever, no?
It's not in their interest to stop the war.
And they say, oh, it will divide Syria, and we don't want it. Very strange.
This is this is blah blah. They are in the same bed with the Americans, the opposition, and they didn't want this de-escalation zone for one reason, because without Al-Nusra Front, which is the Al-Qaeda, the opposition forces their strength will be, if we count it from on the ground, this so-called moderate opposition.
Yeah.
It's Russia, it's Islam's army, it's Al-Nusra Front, it's Turkestan army, it's the Tajiks fighting, and they are called Syrian rebels in Syria. And so this deal, the escalation zone deal, it gives Turkey the right, this is not all declared in these documents, but it is agreed between Turkey and between Russia, so that Turkey deals with this multinational terrorists in Idlib. It will evoke some sort of conflict. Look, I believe the Turks will provoke these rebel groups in Idlib to fight each other and let them finish each other there. And Turkey will have certain influence in Syria. This is unfortunate truth. But what's our priority today in Syria? We have to restore our country in one piece. We have to restore peace and security, and then we will restore our independence and sovereignty. Without stability and peace in Syria, you cannot restore your sovereignty. Our sovereignty is abused by tens of countries who are not invited to fight in Syria, and this is a long-term fight. But I am quite sure that Syrians will overcome this crisis, because if you go to Syria, you've been to Syria, you understand that the Syrians have the determination to win this war. I'm not sure if the other side has the determination to fight forever for the country, because already most of them live outside Syria, these leaders of the so-called opposition, in Paris, in Brussels, in different capitals. But who is fighting in Syria? Assad is in his palace.